In these perilous days, when the Church trembles and the heavens watch in silence, a moment has come that none in the Sacred College expected, and yet it was foreseen by the Spirit long ago. Pope Leo XIV, a new pontificate begins. The world. Celebrated as Pope Leo XIV, once Cardinal Robert Prevost ascended to the throne of Peter on May 8, 2025, the first American, the first Augustinian, chosen not merely by the votes of men, but by the mysterious hand of Providence. His early days were marked with gestures of peace and humility. He met with the Commission for the Protection of Minors, spoke to leaders of nations, extended his hand toward Moscow, and even blessed the cyclists of the Giro d'Italia as they passed through the ancient gardens of the Vatican. The faithful rejoiced as Gregorian chant once again echoed through St. Peter's, the Pope's own voice becoming a symbol of renewal and tradition. And yet, behind the beauty, behind the ceremonies, behind the incense and the sacred processions, there stirred a spiritual storm. Unseen forces clashed in secret chambers. Hidden conversations passed beneath marble domes. The battle for the very soul of the Church raged silently beneath the public harmony. Amidst this fragile calm stood Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the man many once whispered could become Peter's successor, now watching as the tides of power shifted rapidly around him. A son of Asia, a man of the poor, a servant of the gospel. Yet now his countenance carried the weight of something far greater than ecclesiastical ambition. It was as though a fire had been lit within him, not of man, but of God. In his recent interview, Cardinal Tagle's voice trembled with resolve. There is no turning back. The words were simple, but beneath them, a thunder roared. He spoke not simply of programs and policies, but of an irreversible movement of divine justice, of a church called back to its roots, to its first love. It was as though in the secret places of prayer, he had heard the voice that shakes both earth and heaven. But then came the moment. Before the marble altar of St. Peter's Basilica, before the watching eyes of the cardinals and the hidden whispers of the Curia, Cardinal Tagle knelt in absolute silence. He did not speak. He did not protest. Instead, he clutched the crucifix tightly, as though receiving orders from the throne of heaven itself. The atmosphere shifted. Some say a chill ran through the great basilica. Others say a heavenly presence descended, unseen but undeniable. The cardinals looked to one another in confusion. What was happening? Why did Tagle not speak? What had he seen? And why, at that very moment, did the bells of St. Peter's Tower ring unexpectedly, though no scheduled hour of prayer had come? Pope Leo XIV, seated in solemn majesty, did not speak. His eyes met Tagle's, and for a moment that felt like eternity, the air grew thick with a weight of glory and judgment. Some say the Holy Father trembled. Others say he wept quietly. What triggered this act of silent defiance? Why did Cardinal Tagle, known for his humility and obedience, break the rhythm of Vatican decorum? Was it a personal vision? Was it a divine mandate? Or was it the beginning of a spiritual confrontation unseen since the days of Peter and Paul? Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the reactions from the Sacred College were immediate and electric. Cardinal Robert Serra, the voice of tradition, whispered to his confidants, "The hour of purification draws near." Cardinal Raymond Burke, his face stern and pale, was heard to murmur, "The great trial is unfolding. May the faithful hold fast." Tension gripped the Vatican. Rumors spread like wildfire through the corridors of power. Some whispered that Tagle had received visions of coming judgment. Others believed a secret document, long hidden deep in the apostolic archive, had been revealed to him in prayer. The Council of Darkness, the secret factions that have long operated in the shadows of the Church, watched nervously, for this unspoken act threatened to unravel the web of silent compromise that had held for decades. But there was more. The timing of Tagle's act coincided with the growing unease surrounding Pope Leo XIV's new reforms. In his first month, Leo's attempts at peace and balance had already begun to expose the deep fractures within the Vatican walls. The appointment of Dr. Luigi Carbone to oversee Vatican healthcare, seemingly mundane, had triggered investigations into long-hidden financial abuses. The Jubilee of Movements, attracting over 70,000 pilgrims, had become a stage not just for celebration, but for whispers of prophecy, of signs, of the coming shaking foretold by saints of old. And as the faithful gathered under the shadow of St. Peter's Dome, a question hung in the air like thick incense. Has the shaking begun? Has heaven initiated the purging of the bride? And was this, Cardinal Tagle's silence, the trumpet blast of warning before the greater storm? For as it was written in the prophecies of Akita, in the messages of Fatima, and whispered in countless private revelations, the work of Satan will infiltrate even into the Church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against bishops. The signs are converging. The hour is late. The bride of Christ is entering her labor pains, and what follows next may shake the entire world. But as the sun set over the eternal city that evening, something deeper was already unfolding, far beyond what mortal eyes could see. In the hidden chambers beneath the Apostolic Palace, ancient alliances trembled. The so-called Council of Darkness, those secretive factions whose whispered counsel had shaped policies and papal elections for decades, gathered in urgent closed-door meetings. What they feared was not Cardinal Tagle's silence alone. It was what the silence signified. It was a signal, a warning, a spiritual rupture. For within the Vatican, within the sacred walls that have witnessed the coronation of saints and the betrayal of Judases, two forces now stood in direct confrontation. The bride of Christ purified by fire, and the forces of compromise clothed in outward piety but inward corruption. In one corner stood those who seek to restore the true gospel, the voice of the poor, the cry of the unborn, the purity of sacred doctrine. In the other stood the powers who had long exchanged truth for political safety, who had transformed the bride into a fragile puppet of worldly alliances. Cardinal Tagle's act, simple yet heaven-commanded, was a sword into the very heart of this fragile balance. And yet, as the days unfolded after his public kneeling, reports began to leak of supernatural events within the Vatican walls. Monks, in hidden monasteries, reported visions of a sword suspended over St. Peter's Basilica, glowing with the fire of divine judgment. Nuns in perpetual adoration heard faint weeping in their prayer cells, weeping not of man, but of the sorrow of heaven, watching the corruption of her church. And in the apostolic archives, mysterious lights were said to appear, illuminating the long-hidden documents concerning Fatima's third secret, the full contents of which have never been fully revealed to the faithful. As these divine signs unfolded, Pope Leo XIV found himself increasingly isolated. Though his pontificate had begun with worldwide acclaim, being the first Augustinian, the first American pope, the humble missionary from Peru, now the air around him grew thick with both hope and dread. For even within the papal court itself, divisions sharpened. Some close to the Holy Father urged him to silence Cardinal Tagle, to discipline him, to restore order before the unrest spread. Yet others, whispers from within the congregation for the doctrine of the faith, pleaded with him to listen, to discern whether the silence of Tagle was not rebellion, but revelation. And behind it all, the shadow of Cardinal Robert Sarah loomed like a silent lion. Though officially retired, Sarah's words traveled like thunder in traditional Catholic circles. The hour of the Church's agony is here. The bride must be purified, and purification comes not through compromise, but through the cross. Meanwhile, Cardinal Raymond Burke, ever watchful, issued a private warning to a small group of his confidants. There are those among us who wear the robes of shepherds but speak with the tongue of serpents. The time of great deception is upon us. Indeed, in the following days, strange occurrences multiplied throughout Rome. A lightning bolt struck the bronze statue of St. Peter on June 4th, the same statue where popes traditionally place the ceremonial crown. A black dove was seen circling above Castel Sant'Angelo, the ancient fortress once used to shelter popes during times of siege, as if a heavenly sign of looming spiritual battle. Marian icon reportedly wept tears of blood in a small chapel near the Vatican gardens, an image now secretly guarded by a small group of priests. And through all of this, whispers began to grow among the faithful. Has the great apostasy begun? Is this the final trial spoken of by Our Lady of Fatima? Is God now separating the wheat from the tares within the house of Peter? Even outside the Vatican, world events began to mirror the internal tremors of Rome. Conflicts in Eastern Europe escalated. Rumors of secret pacts between political leaders and certain Vatican advisors emerged. The financial scandal surrounding Vatican Bank resurfaced with new accusations of hidden funds being used to influence church policy. And most shockingly, several anonymous sources leaked documents suggesting that certain prelates had been quietly preparing alternative conclave strategies, as if expecting a sudden and unexpected papal crisis. But amidst this gathering storm, one reality became clear. The bride of Christ is being sifted. Heaven is no longer silent. The hour of decision has come. For in the spiritual realm, angelic hosts stand ready. The prayers of countless saints, of Peter, Paul, Catherine of Siena, Padre Pio, Faustina, rise like incense before the throne of God, pleading for mercy upon his church, and the voice of the Lamb echoes across the heavens. I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The shaking has begun, and what is coming next will leave the entire Catholic world breathless. As the bells of St. Peter's Basilica tolled under the moonlit sky, Rome itself seemed to pulse with an ancient tension, the same tension that once filled the catacombs when early Christians whispered their prayers beneath the weight of empire. But now, it was not pagan Rome that threatened the bride of Christ. It was the battle within her very chambers. A battle unseen by the pilgrims and tourists who gazed upon Michelangelo's dome, but known fully by heaven, where angels and demons clashed over the soul of the Catholic Church. In the Apostolic Palace, Pope Leo XIV sat in silent prayer. The man once celebrated for his humility and gentle governance now faced decisions far heavier than any his predecessors had faced in generations. The College of Cardinals had fractured into unseen camps, those who clung to the truth of Christ's unchanging gospel, and those who secretly sought to reshape the Church into a mirror of the world. And as Cardinal Tagle's silent act reverberated, like an earthquake across the marble halls, new revelations began to emerge. Revelations that would send even the most seasoned Vatican officials into fearful whispers. A secret document, hidden deep within the Vatican Apostolic Archive, secured beneath the bronze keys of St. Peter, had resurfaced. It was a long-buried letter, once classified by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, known only to a few trusted archivists. The document contained portions of the unreleased Third Secret of Fatima, along with personal prophetic warnings. Written by Saint Padre Pio in his final years, warnings that spoke directly of a false light rising from within the Church herself, the scattering of shepherds at the hands of wolves dressed in white, a silence broken by one who will kneel before the cross, triggering the great trial. The words chilled the hearts of those few who read them, and now they saw. Tagle's silence was not rebellion. It was the fulfillment of prophecy. Inside the Vatican gardens, under the watchful statues of saints, secret meetings intensified. The so-called Council of Darkness, bishops and advisors whose loyalty was not to Christ but to worldly powers, convened beneath the marble cloisters. Their discussions turned desperate. If Tagle speaks again, it will ignite a fire we cannot control. Pope Leo must act swiftly. The people are watching. The media is watching. The faithful are watching. The bride must not be allowed to awaken fully, or the entire structure will collapse. But as they plotted in shadow, the heavens declared a different verdict. Storm. Clouds gathered over Rome, though no storms were forecast. A fierce wind swept through St. Peter's Square, toppling scaffolding erected for the upcoming Jubilee celebrations. Pilgrims who had come for blessings instead witnessed nature's sudden fury, as though the breath of God himself was blowing through his holy city. Meanwhile, in monasteries across the world, from Fatima to Lourdes, from Mount Athos to Mount Carmel, seers and mystics reported heavenly visions. In the cloistered convent of Avila, a Carmelite nun, who had spoken only to her confessor for years, entered a deep ecstasy and cried out, "The hour of the bride's labor has come. The division of the shepherds is at hand. The time of martyrdom and purification will fall like lightning upon Rome." The word spread rapidly, reaching even the underground networks of faithful Catholics who had long watched the Vatican with prayerful fear. And as the Vatican's internal storm escalated, external forces began to move as well. World leaders, some secretly connected to the Council of Darkness, issued veiled statements about respecting Vatican sovereignty, while subtly hinting at the need for modernization of Catholic doctrine to align with the evolving moral codes of the global order. Whispers arose of secret negotiations between compromised Vatican diplomats and international organizations that sought to undermine the Church's teachings on life, marriage, and the Eucharist. But amidst the compromise and betrayal, a remnant within the Church, the bride's hidden army, refused to be silenced. Catholic families gathered nightly to pray the Rosary with unusual urgency. Small Marian prayer cells multiplied in secret. Adoration chapels were filled at midnight, with souls weeping for the sins of the hierarchy. Exorcists reported an increase in demonic manifestations, a sign that the enemy knew his time was short. In one chilling report, a priest assigned to the Vatican exorcism ministry described a possessed soul suddenly screaming during a session, "The woman is coming, she will crush us. The Church will rise again, the man in white will fall, but the cross will stand." Even now, as Pope Leo XIV reviewed the secret documents delivered to him under heavy guard, the lines between loyalty and betrayal blurred. Was Cardinal Tagle to be silenced or embraced? Would the Pope act under fear or under the Holy Spirit's fire? Would the secret factions succeed, or would heaven intervene in terrifying glory? As these questions hung heavily over the Eternal City, another event shook the Vatican to its core. A mysterious figure, dressed in white garments but with face concealed, was caught on Vatican security cameras entering the underground crypt of St. Peter's Basilica at midnight. Vatican guards later discovered an ancient scroll placed upon the tomb of St. Peter himself, with words scrawled in blood-red ink. "The time of shaking is here. The bride shall pass through the fire. Woe to the shepherds who feed themselves. The key."
Scroll disappeared shortly after Vatican security attempted to seize it, and across the Tiber, an ancient Dominican prophecy was whispered once more among scholars. When the Silent One kneels and the shepherds turn against each other, the days
of purification will rain upon Rome like fire from the sky. The Church now stands at the edge of a precipice, one step away from either revival or ruin. The bride of Christ is being stripped of every earthly protection, that she may stand purified, clothed only in the righteousness of her Lord. And the next great act is about to unfold. And then, the moment came. June 13th, the anniversary of the second apparition of Fatima, arrived under a sky of strange stillness. Rome awakened to an eerie calm. No birds sang. The bells of St. Peter's did not toll. At dawn, the Eternal City stood frozen, as though even nature held its breath. In the Apostolic Palace, Pope Leo XIV summoned an emergency meeting. Present were only a handful of cardinals, those trusted, those feared, and those suspected. Cardinal Tagle stood at one end of the marble chamber, silent once again. On the opposite side, Cardinals Sarah and Burke watched with solemn faces. The members of the Council of Darkness were present too, veiling their eyes beneath their crimson caps. The Holy Father rose. His voice, usually gentle, carried an authority that shook the room. Today, we stand before heaven and earth. The bride is trembling. The wolves are circling. But I have seen what the Lord has revealed. He raised his hand, and with it, he revealed the once hidden portion of the Third Secret of Fatima. Gasps filled the chamber. Some crossed themselves. Others turned pale. For it spoke not of mere political divisions, but of a false council, rising within the heart of Rome, where doctrine would be poisoned, where the Eucharist would be profaned, and where a remnant would suffer under persecution from within the Church itself. And at the bottom of the document, a handwritten note, long hidden by the Council of Darkness, stood words traced by St. Padre Pio himself. A man shall kneel. A silence shall thunder louder than any voice, and from that silence, the bride shall awaken to her purification. All eyes turned to Cardinal Tagle, the man who had knelt, the man who had fulfilled the sign. Suddenly, the ground beneath the apostolic palace began to tremble. Cracks formed in the marble. Statues shook violently. A thunderclap, louder than any storm, echoed above Rome, though no clouds were in the sky. The massive bronze doors of the chamber flung open, though no man had touched them, and in that moment, a blinding light filled the room. Those present fell to their knees, unable to stand under the weight of glory that descended. The Council of Darkness screamed in terror. Some tried to flee but found themselves frozen in place. An angel stood before them, a towering figure robed in light, his sword blazing with fire. His voice roared like many waters. Enough! You have polluted my bride long enough. You have clothed yourselves in garments of power while devouring the flock. The time of hiding is over. The shaking has begun. The judgment of the shepherds is at hand. The bride shall rise, not through your schemes, but through fire, martyrdom, and the blood of saints. My mother has held back my hand for generations. But now the sword shall fall, and from the ashes my church will shine like gold refined. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, the angel vanished. The earthquake ceased. But something even greater had been set in motion. Across the world, reports poured in. In Fatima, the sun was seen spinning once again, witnessed by tens of thousands. In Akita, the statue of Our Lady wept tears of crystal, not of sorrow, but of hope. In Garabandal, children reported visions of the triumph of the Immaculate Heart beginning. And in Rome, the greatest sign of all, St. Peter's Basilica, for the first time in centuries, rang all its bells at once, not by human hands, but by divine force. The Council of Darkness was dismantled overnight. Secret files were seized, hidden accounts exposed. Bishops who had long betrayed their vows were publicly removed. The Vatican, once captive to unseen powers, was purged like the temple cleansed by Christ himself. Cardinal Tagle, no longer silent, stood beside Pope Leo XIV, not as rivals, but as brothers anointed for this hour. The bride has been stripped, Pope Leo declared, but she stands radiant again. The gates of hell did not prevail. And as millions gathered for a global mass of reparation, a new cry rose from the faithful. Totus tuus, for Christ alone. The purification had come. The storm had passed, and from the ruins of corruption, the bride of Christ stood glorious, her garments once stained, now washed white by the blood of the Lamb. No one, not even the councils of darkness, not even the princes of this world, had foreseen how heaven would move. And as the heavens themselves resounded with the chants of millions, a final inscription appeared mysteriously at the base of St. Peter's throne. Behold, I make all things new.